Hello everyone and welcome back. Recently we're talking about how to ditch Lightroom in the end, so maybe this winter we will be able to do that.
Bokeh Photos.
Today we'll be comparing how the highlights and white sliders work in comparison with Capture One, just to check out some fine details between this and this. So if I, for example here, take those highlights to the max, it looks like this. If I take this highlights to the max, how similar does it look? Let's just simply find out. I can see some differences here in those details around there. This is a JPEG file, so let's compare a couple of those just for the sake. Let's maybe zoom out a little bit. Okay, this is more or less the same. I can't really scroll this either down or up. So it's not much of a difference in the end. Let's try and reset this. And thanks Paweł for your comment, and I just wanted to try it out right now. Let's bump up the shadows. This is from the lower part, this is the highest part. And how does it look in Lightroom? Shadows. From the lowest, how similar does it look? I would say the histogram is very similar, as you can see here and here. A little more space, so there's that. And if you go to +100, it also looks very much the same. I would say this is a little bit brighter in the end, because this is a lot more darker in Capture One. So there's this little difference. Let's zoom out and see how this looks right here. So this is something, I mean, I feel that this is brighter in Lightroom. This is more or less the same, I would say. Maybe this is a little bit more detail, and Lightroom is a lot darker. And if I go up all the way with the shadows, this also pulls those shadows a little bit further down the road, as you can see here. So my comment was that yes, those sliders are not the same. I mean, they shouldn't be, because why should they? I mean, more or less the math could be similar, as we can see it's pretty much is. This is a JPEG file, of course. We'll go to raw files in a second. But does it look any better on any of those? I mean, obviously there is a... I would say the Capture One image is a little bit better in terms of, I don't know, colors, and those shadows aren't that bright, but I can always lower it down a little bit to get more or less the same effect. So, you tell me, when do you think that this looks the same? Like, is this the same image? I'm not really sure. I would say it's the same, it's close enough. I don't really have to do anything more with this. My main point I'm looking at right now, it's that part here, because this area is a lot darker right now, and this is actually black. So let's go give it a try like this. Yeah, something like that. So I would say, because on 100% this is obviously brighter than here. And yes, as I already mentioned, thank you for your comment, of course. I could play with curves, with the brightness overall, etc, etc, or just with highlights. But I'm just simply accustomed to having a lot more flexibility in one slider, and I would go with Lightroom for that part. And that's it. And this is number one that I wanted to check with you. We'll go through a couple of examples later on, but let's go through the features I want to talk. First of all, this was one of those. Those sliders are not necessarily working the same way. Let's try another slider. And let's try, for example, the blacks. If we pump up the blacks to 100, on Capture One it looks like this. If we go with those blacks to 100, it looks like this. And for example, excuse me, as you can see this part here, this is pretty black. This is here a lot lighter, like this is no black, this has a color. Here, total blackness. So in that case, I would have to give this to Capture One, because we got some color, we have some information in that part. But which one is better? I got no idea. Look at this. This is also a lot brighter. This is pure darkness for Lightroom. So there are differences in just simply calculating the values from everything that's around, and every software does this a little bit different. So which one is better? I got no idea. There is no one good answer for that. If you learn how to work with any of those, like for example, most of us are accustomed to Lightroom, we can deal with this, right? But Capture One is totally different, and I hate that I have to click once here to have the white balance and the color adjustment in a totally different part, and all the sharpening is in a different part. I mean, yes, I get it. They made this to a split screen, so when we are working on the basics, we are here. Okay, then we are going here for the sharpening, and we have all those noise reduction stuff, etc. Great. But maybe this is just me bragging about that this here, we have everything in one single place, all those steps. It's just a simple, faster access, which I like a lot better. Maybe I can change this menu somehow, I don't really know. If you know, leave me a comment, and that's it. Sorry. So, to sum up about those sliders, a couple of examples later on also. There is no good answer, and yes, I was wrong. More or less, because you get pretty much the same, but there are more small differences. And it depends on the photo, but sometimes it can be enough, or sometimes it can be not enough. So it's up to you, but probably, true enough, there isn't much cases like that anyway. So let's go to a raw file. Let's grab this city image, and let's lower down the highlights, and okay, and it crashed. Oh my god. Why? Why did you do this to me? Capture One, say bye-bye. Okay, we're back in action. So let's try and go with the highlights as low as possible. This, I would say, on my left, on the Capture One, is a lot darker, but it has a little bit more contrast. This is very shadowy, I mean dark in general, only by those two sliders. There's a lot of fringing here, as you can see. A very, pretty much non-existent fringing over here. And this is no other adjustments. So I would say that, yes, Capture One does do a great job at producing details from our raw file. Let's check those. Yeah, also you can see fringing here. Very small, if any, is here. But this is visible. Obviously you can see there is some work done here automatically, probably. I'm not sure. Don't judge me on that. Don't quote me on that, sorry. Judge also, but is there a difference? Can you really see it? I mean, obviously there is, but does it make any photo a lot better than the other? I wouldn't go so far. And there's that. This is what I wanted to compare. In the end, Capture One sliders work very, very nice. Like, let's go with the shadows sliders and see the performance of that. I mean, this is a bit laggy because I have a lot of stuff on my PC currently, but as you can see, this works pretty well. And on Lightroom, not that bad, not the worst. So I would say you can actually live with Lightroom today. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood, or maybe I'm too much fed of pizza and Christmas snacks, but Lightroom does work today very nicely. Capture One, well, there's the price point, which is huge. The new Capture One is, like, in 1 week there will be version 22, so you don't want to buy 21, obviously. There will be some panorama merging, HDR stitching, etc, etc. So we can try out this, but the price point, it's a lot more than Lightroom. And just to compare those two, I don't have my trial for exposure, unfortunately. I will check out the XO Photo Lab in a couple of days. But this is what I wanted to check. How the sliders work for different images. And for example, we have that image. I would like, for instance, to recover a lot of details in those clouds by lowering down the highlights. And right, and how does it look like? This is a JPEG file, true enough, but just for the sake of argument, let's see how it looks. Now, I would say Lightroom looks a little bit better, in my opinion. Here we can see this grayish area around those clouds. Here, it's a lot more contrasty. This is a lot more delicate to go through one thing to the other thing. But here we can see a lot of gray stuff. Here we can see a lot more contrast, with which, and maybe in that case, it makes the image a lot better. And this simply pops out more. This is a little bit flattened, I would say. I don't know, you tell me. I'm really curious about your opinion. So for example, I would go with this sky if I would have to choose. This looks better for me. Maybe because of those highlights? I'm not really sure, because this is just simply, it's everything together. It's just simply like you would mix all that stuff and maybe there is something a little bit brighter, something a little bit more grayish. That's the bottom line. This is how I feel about that. It's not scientific by any stretch of imagination. So, let's go to some shadows. So with something like that, let's try and pump up those blacks to the max. Okay, this works great. As hell, I would say. And let's see how Lightroom will do this. There is no freaking comparison. Like, this image alone, that example here, makes me want to buy Capture One just for any money they would want to get from me. Like, look at this. Obviously this works differently, it's not the same slider in the end, but the histogram looks more or less the same, but like, only one slider, right? Let's go with the blacks back and let's try and go with the shadows. Ten times better. If I would pump up the exposure here, I could eventually get the same look. The question is, how much more noisy will it be? Let's see that guy with the camera here. Can I zoom in? Okay, so for instance, you can see here. Here, you get no idea. He's probably on his phone reading something, I don't know. But he's having, obviously, a camera and a strap around his neck. Maybe this is too bright. Okay, this is obviously not bright enough. Like, the sea is bright, it is darker a lot than in this example, and I can see the strap clearly, right? Here, in the whole image, this is more or less the same, but those details, this looks pretty much the same, because this is the sky. But let's see those people here. I mean, this guy with that strap is like, it's probably just an accident while testing this, but still you can see that there are things like that might simply, that we can see. Now, what's the problem? There is a lot more noise in Lightroom, because we did bump up the exposure by one stop, and it was not that good at gathering the blacks and the shadows. So as you can see, it's not that fancy. We can of course try to denoise in Lightroom a little bit, so we can more or less be on the level of Capture One, but we already did this in Capture One with one slider. Like, how easy is this? Now this is maybe comparable right now. We could play with this like all day long, but those details on the left in Capture One, like, let's check this tower here. Look how this is just simply, it's not noisy, but it's just muddy. Everything is mixed together. Like, there is no contrast here. This looks a lot better in my opinion, especially those trees, those upper parts. Here it's like everything together. this, I can see a little bit more separation between everything. Like there's a lot more contrast here and on those kids here. But still, we would have to ask the question, would anyone see this? Like, does it really matter for anyone? The frame is as it is, and that's the bottom line. What I wanted to do here is to capture the sun, so this will have all the details, so I won't have any pure whites or very bright highlights like in that example. And that's the bottom line. But if I lower this down, look that everything goes down in that example. And here in those highlights, I pretty much lower only the really brightest parts. I don't influence the rest of the image. And in Lightroom, it's not the case. Everything is getting brighter or darker. This is what I meant by talking that those sliders in Lightroom have a lot more wider range where they are working on the image and how they are working. If you are changing something here, it has a more profound effect on the whole image than those sliders here. Of course, we can brush everything and just work on this for ages, but should it be like that? I don't know, you tell me. I personally like to go with the basic stuff like that, just simply go through the exposure, the histogram should be okay, and that's it, that's the bottom line. Afterwards, I pick my favorites, as you can see, as you will be able to see in my process in the next video, and then I can focus on like 3 to 5 images that I really like, instead of fiddling around in Lightroom, because in Affinity or a dedicated software, it's a lot faster and it's more easier, and that's it for me. Okay guys, so that's it. This is what I wanted to show you. Let's just make a quick another example of how those highlights, for example, work, because this is for me the most brilliant part and I need this a lot. Like in this image, it looks very well on both of those. Let's go with the details a little bit. Like this in Capture One really looks good. Let's try to make more or less the same size. Sorry. Yeah, like this is not really visible. If you could compare anything and you would see anything, you really have to pixel peep. And if someone looks at this at a mobile or a small screen, not a chance. And we are zooming this like 100%. This is bullshit. Everything is great. Affinity, yeah, sorry, not Affinity, Capture One. What I don't like about this is that we got everything separated here. There's a lot more stuff going on around, but of course you can learn this. The price point isn't that great. The blacks, as you saw, are tremendously overruling anything that Lightroom can do for us. But the price point, very steep. Maybe there will be some sale, or there was. Didn't catch it. And there is the version 22 that is coming out in a week, so maybe this is something for you. The tethering stuff I'm not using, so I don't really have any opinion on that, but I wanted to check out those sliders, and as you can see, there's unfortunately no good questions, and you will have to deal with those. But the blacks and all the algorithms in Capture One, well, the price point comes with a couple of things. Performance, for example, this is the fastest software I used. It's really great. The bottom line, it's faster than Lightroom, it's faster than Exposure, definitely, but I would say that Exposure still has a lot easier interface to use, because everything is very small in 4K resolution. That sucks a lot, but you have everything in a single screen, and it's very nice because you have easy access. You can copy paste all the adjustments. Like pretty much every software does the same thing. There are only a couple of features. If you really need them, you should get the software only for them. It's like filtering from your favorite presets. You just have the software for that preset and nothing else. Or maybe adding some sun flares or some creative effects. That's it. In Capture One, then there isn't many of those. On One or Exposure has a lot more of that. Luminar has a ton of those, but I hate Luminar, so I won't be talking about that. Maybe later on some hate episode, how it goes, but that's the bottom line. Sorry for disappointing you, there's no good answer, but as you can see, at least we now know definitely that those sliders are working differently. And there's that. Now you can go see me brag about Capture One and how do I go with my images and my whole flow. Just see what's the perfect scenario for me. Thanks for tuning in, have a nice day, leave me a comment, Merry Christmas, and bye for now.